morning, everybody. I am gonna make a quick video here to show you guys a green chili egg bake. We eat this for breakfast pretty regularly. This is on a pretty regular weekend rotation. And so I have here just an 8x8 pan. These happen to be roasted Shishito chilies. I ended up with an unexpected bounty of Shishitos this year because I planted poblanos, and it turned out the seeds were not poblanos, they were Shishitos. And it took me a while to really realize that. I kept waiting for them to change shape or look a little different, and then finally realized, nope, those are just Shishitos. So Shishitos are a really lovely Japanese pepper that traditionally are eaten. You just blister them in a hot skillet and then put olive oil and salt on them, and they're a really lovely appetizer. They're really popular as what's called tapas, which is a Spanish appetizer, or small plate. And so normally that is how you eat them. As they get bigger and they turn color, you usually eat them green. As they turn color and they get ripe, they start to get hot. And so this is a nice substitute for a green chili in an egg dish. So this recipe calls for 1.5 cups of milk. And honestly, you could use any dairy substitute and it would also work. The milk is just, we're making a custard, basically. This is another custard, which is eggs and dairy, or eggs and non-dairy, if that's your wheelhouse. So 1.5 cups of milk. I like this because it's really easy to put together because I do it in the blender. If you're gonna blend stuff, it's always good to put the liquid on the bottom. It helps everything mix quickly. So 1.5 cups of milk, 3 eggs, and in this case, I'm going to use these turkey eggs. And turkey eggs they're bigger than a chicken egg. I'm not really worried about the difference in size. They have a super tough eggshell, so they're a little tricky to crack without getting eggshell in your dish. But they are super tasty. I kind of have to use my fingernails to like pry my way in there to get into that egg. All right, we're gonna add 2 tablespoons of flour, and this is just an added thickener. If you were gluten-free, I'm sure that you could use cornstarch or tapioca starch or potato starch or some other gluten-free starch and have the same effect. So don't feel like you have to use flour. And then the original recipe does not call for seasoning. I'm not sure why. It really needs it. This is a chipotle salt that I make, but you could use any seasoning salt that you liked, or just salt and pepper. I'm doing a 1/2 teaspoon of chipotle seasoning. If you were doing just salt and pepper, I would probably do a 1/4 teaspoon each. I would say a minimum of a 1/4 teaspoon of actual salt in here. And we're just gonna blend this up. This is an ancient Vitamix that a friend gave me when she was cleaning out a relative's house. All right, so I put the chilies on the bottom of my pan. The other thing I need is some cheese. Okay, this recipe calls for 1.5 cups of cheese. It calls for Monterey Jack. You can use whatever you have on hand. It makes absolutely no difference. It's just whatever you like. Monterey Jack is a nice melty cheese. You could use pepper jack if you wanted more spicy. This happens to be a mix of Edam, which was on sale, discounted at the grocery store, and so we went ahead and bought it. And then this is a Walla Walla White, which is very similar to a cheddar. I really hate hand grating cheese if I have to do very much of it. This calls for a cup and a half of cheese, which is 6 ounces. A cup of most cheeses is 4 ounce, unless it's a really dry cheese like Parmesan. Yeah, this is one of those instances where it's worth getting my food processor dirty because I really hate hand grating cheese. I'm weird that way. It's a lot of cheese. It's a good amount, but that's okay. And you could cut back on the amount of cheese. Certainly you don't need to put this much in here. This is kind of a nice Sunday treat for us. So that's the base recipe, this and the custard. I am throwing some other things in here, and this is the beauty of this recipe, is you can adapt it to all different kinds of vegetables depending on what you have coming in from your garden or sitting in your fridge that needs to be used up. So I'm also going to add a little bit of zucchini, and this is just slightly, I made a zucchini tart the other night. It was a recipe, a goat cheese zucchini tart recipe from Ina Gardner from Barefoot Contessa, and I had a little bit of extra leftover zucchini that didn't go into that, and so this was just in my fridge, so I'm using it up. I roasted it slightly, mostly just to dry it out a bit, because it's zucchini can be pretty watery. And then I am also adding, this is zucchini, and then this is summer squash or patty pan squash, which looks like this. And they were really big. I had a couple that kind of got away from me, and so I had scraped out the inside seed pocket and then sliced them, which is why they're that weird shape. And then this, I've been making beef stock. We are buying a quarter of a cow in the fall, and I need to clean out my freezer, and I had a bunch of beef bones in there, so I'm making homemade beef broth, beef stock, beef bone broth, whatever you want to call it. They're all the same thing. And that was on my stove cooking all night. I ended up cooking it for about 16 hours. And this is just a couple of the bones were actually pretty meaty. They were shanks, and they had a lot of meat on them. And so this is just leftover meat from that cook. This is not going to have, this beef is not going to have a lot of flavor, because literally it was beef, a little bit of peppercorns, a tiny bit of tomato paste, some black pepper, no salt, and then water, of course, just cooked. So it's going to be very beefy, but it's not going to have much flavor. But I figured I might as well use it up. Protein is protein. We'll probably make quesadillas or something out of the rest of this. But since I have it here, I'm going to throw this in as well. So again, this is an incredibly adaptable recipe. You can make it what you want. I've done it with broccoli in it. I always put chilies in it just because that's kind of where the recipe started. You don't have to. If you're not into green chilies, you could leave it out. So again, just an egg bake, very simple. There's a million different versions of this out here. But I've been making this version for a very long time, and so I know it works well. The original recipe is really simple, and it's a great blank slate for a lot of other things. So I'm just going to pour my custard onto this. I probably really should have done my cheese last instead of first, so that I was going to get some nice crispy, cheesy bits on top, but I'm not going to worry about that. All right, this gets cooked at 350 for 45 to 50 minutes, basically until it's set. So in it goes. And we'll be back in 45 minutes to see how that comes out. All right, our timer has gone off. I think I set it for 45 minutes. It will vary depending on your oven, so check it at 40. You might need to go all the way to 50. This looks good. So not jiggly in the middle, pulling away slightly from the sides. That's a good sign. All right, get that out of there. I'm gonna let this cool for about 5 minutes before I slice it. All right. cut this bad boy. Let's see what we have. In a lot of ways, this is basically a quiche without the crust. Those meat pieces are kind of making a bit of a mess to try to cut. And if I let this cool more, it would come out of here cleaner. But we're hungry. It's late on a Saturday morning. And we are ready for some breakfast. There you go. And you can top this with salsa, with sour cream. We often put sliced avocados on it. So lots of great toppings. Or you can just eat it plain. But there you have it. Green chili egg bake Sunday morning breakfast. Yum.